Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And if you are new to the show, please come on in, the water is fine. We have a simple mission here on this Daily Tech Podcast, and that's to share different stories every day of how technology is transforming how we live, work, learn, and how it's transforming our world too. Now, I have spoken a lot on this podcast recently about how we're all changing how we think and how we work. But today, I want to explore how technology is changing how we learn. And today's guest is Jeremy from D2L, which famously created Brightspace, the easy, flexible and smart learning platform that I'm sure many of you would have heard of. And Jeremy is D2L's Chief Strategy Officer, and he's coming on the podcast today to discuss the current and future role of technology in education. And I'm also hoping we can talk about closing the education tech gap, and also opportunities for EdTech and collaboration to push advancement forward and explore the future of learning. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Ontario in Canada so we can speak with Jeremy from D2L. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Neil. I want to say thanks for having me on. It's great to be here on the podcast. My name is Jeremy Odger, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of D2L, who's a leading learning platform company for education and training. And I expect get more into a bit about what D2L does in a second, but maybe just a quick bit of my background for context. So I've been working in technology and online learning really since the dawn of the commercial internet in 1994, when I worked on some of the very first online university courses at the time. I went on to work in a variety of industries, from telecommunications and banking to various software and web companies, including a couple of companies that I started myself. But around 2000, I helped get a company called Desire to Learn off the ground. And we were focused on a mission of helping to transform the way the world learns. And so for the last 20 plus years, I've been at D2L helping K-12 education systems, higher education institutions, companies, and governments along that mission, which is really leveraging technology to support more flexible and personalized learning at scale, and now in more than 40 countries around the world. So, D2L is a place where I think everyone at the company truly feels like they're making a real impact on the world, delivering, more accessible, engaging, inspiring learning opportunities for millions of people every day. And I can't think of a better reason to get up and go to work every day. And it really feels like we're just getting started.
Absolutely. It really does feel like we're just getting started. And before we started recording the podcast today, we were talking about how much life has changed, and we've both been working in our home offices for the last 12 months pretty much. But I'm curious, if we dared to go back in time 12 months, can you tell me more about technology's role in education way back in January 2020, when the world was a very different place, wasn't it?
It was. And I mean, if I could go back 12 months and knew what I knew now, first of all, I would have probably cranked my Amazon toilet paper subscription up to 11 and bought a lot more Bitcoin. But in terms of where we're at with technology and education, I think the answer here is really, it depends, right? I would say overall, technology's had a massive impact on most industries around the world. Education has historically been one of the more lagging sectors to embrace it. And I think, there's a lot of reasons for that. But it might make sense to talk about it in three kind of distinct groups. So I sort of think about our markets as K-12 schools, higher education, and then corporate training and upskilling. Yeah. And in K-12, let's face it, we're all experts in K-12 education, right? We've all been there and we know how it should be, right? It should be the way it was for us, or maybe not, right? But the fact is there's a lot of inertia there, and change is hard enough, but there's lots of extra focus on education systems to maintain the status quo. So 12 months ago, we saw fairly low adoption rates of traditional schools leveraging, the capabilities available to them for digital approaches to learning. And that could have meant, simply shifting to digital content, or leveraging blended learning techniques or hybrid learning where you might toggle between online and face-to-face, or offering fully online courses to their students. And teachers were definitely adopting teaching apps for things like math or reading, but there wasn't really yet broad adoption of real learning platforms to deliver more holistic experiences. And obviously, I'm generalizing a little bit here, and there were early adopters doing wonderful things with technology, but globally, it was still a pretty small number. Now, when we look to higher education, it's a bit of a different story. Higher education in North America and many other parts of the world have very high adoption rates. Learning management systems are implemented at basically 100% of universities and colleges to varying degrees. And they've been using these types of systems for probably 20 years now. However, most of it was for either continuing and further education or blended learning resources to complement a face-to-face classroom experience. Still much further ahead than we're seeing in K-12. And the role of technology slowly continued to increase in importance over the last couple of decades. But higher education had definitely started to recognize the power that it can bring to the table. But getting it rolled out, adopted, and used effectively can be the bigger challenge there. And then lastly, in corporate learning, this is where I think there was a bit of a revolution brewing. Team and I have published a number of white papers around this topic over the last few years. But the macro trends that we were seeing around the world, including things like, an explosion in the number of distinct skills being required in most industries, the shortening shelf life of especially professional and technical skills, and the rise of new forms of automation, with AI and other technologies starting to enter new realms of cognitive skills and tasks. All of these trends have led to a growing consensus that we need more ubiquitous lifelong learning to ensure that we as mere humans continue to have economic relevance and continue to evolve our skill sets in a world that's changing more quickly under our feet every day. So whereas companies of the past may have just thought, well, I need new skills, I'll just hire for them. That stops working in a world where the skills are so new that you can't, or the demand is so much higher than supply that you can't. You see companies trying to hire for cybersecurity skills or data science roles facing this challenge head on right now. So the fact is increasingly companies are going to need to invest in continual upskilling and reskilling of their staff to continue to stay competitive. So this realization is starting to take hold, and companies are looking at ways to invest in solving for this need in a modern way that doesn't look like your grandma's corporate training program. Employees want their learning experiences to be like all of their other consumer experiences. They want it personalized, on demand, they want flexibility, and they want it built around them. So they really want the Netflix model of training, not the TV guide model of the past. And technology is a critical piece of the puzzle there in achieving that. So I don't think the pandemic necessarily changed the need or the direction in any of these markets, but it absolutely sped up the pace of need for change to a level that a lot of the world really wasn't prepared for.
And obviously, over the last few years, we've seen technology slowly reshaping education. But I'm curious, is that something that you've seen COVID drive even stronger, especially as people have gone from learning in classrooms to in their homes? Has that formed as a digital accelerant of sorts?
Yeah, this, when we think specifically about this shift to digital, there was a recent report in Canada that talked about the COVID crisis being a catalyst for post-secondary education. And they did a survey and they said that, pre-crisis, 50% of Canadian higher ed institutions said that they lacked the expertise to do online learning. And only about 16% of university programs were mainly online. And now here we are, a year later, most institutions have been fully online for the last year, right? So I look at it this way. I feel like the pandemic has brought an interesting mixture of crisis and opportunity, or as I like to call it, a crisitunity. On one hand, we saw like an immediate adoption of a variety of learning technologies, right? We've seen many states and provinces and countries and schools and teachers all rush to adopt something, right? So they can keep the learning happening as best they can. But what we saw in most places can best be described as emergency remote teaching, right? There was a limited time for any real planning or proper training of teachers or adapting learning experiences for online. So we saw a lot of video conferencing trying to replicate the classroom experience example. But for anyone like me who's spent endless hours on video calls over the last year, they know this isn't an ideal way to learn. And, that being said, I think what we did accomplish in the last year was that we broke through a lot of inertia and cultural resistance barriers to using technology for learning. I know so many people who early in the pandemic told me, my job would never work remotely, and now they've been working remote from home for the last year, and some even preferring it. Now, that's obviously not universally true, but I clearly saw blockers coming down as familiarity and experience with technology went up. So I think we've expanded our collective minds about the art of the possible. And I think that's a good thing. But where we need to head next is refocusing away from emergency responses and back towards high quality learning experiences, right? New models of learning, online, hybrid, blended, and building more resilience into our systems of learning so that they can adapt and evolve as we face new challenges in the future.
So from here, then, how do we continue to close that education tech gap that we have seen both on this side of the pond and where you are too?
Yeah, I talked a bit about some of the pressures to maintain the status quo earlier. I think our experiences during the pandemic will hopefully give our education system some room to experiment with new approaches, including with technology. But one of the things that popped up almost immediately as the world faced moving learning online was an escalation on issues of equity. Right? This came in a number of different forms, like do all students have appropriate levels of connectivity and devices to leverage? Are you providing them with the tools and applications that allow them the same level of accessibility as other students have? And how are you accommodating disabilities, right? Basically ensuring some students aren't falling behind simply because of their circumstances. Now, these weren't issues that didn't exist before, but they were definitely laid bare around the world by the pandemic. And I suspect that we'll continue to see these issues discussed at the policy level around the world, especially access to affordable broadband, right? The internet is quickly becoming the primary channel to participating in our modern world, whether that's for access to information, government services, access to commerce, or even work, right? And especially access to learning. For many people in the last year, it's been the only way to access learning. But to go back to your original question, to close the education tech gap, we need to address issues of equity, and we need to provide the right tools and the right training to our educators. They're the gateway to next generation approaches, and they need the support to get there.
And something that I think we're all learning to do now is think differently and work differently. And we're all exploring the art of the possible, like you said a few moments ago. But what opportunities do you see for EdTech and schools to further collaborate and push advancement forward? And equally, not just the future of work, but we're talking about the future of learning here too. So what do you see going on there?
Yeah, I think, there is so much to be gained through collaboration. Collaboration between tech and education, and collaboration between education and industry. Education, it needs to transform to evolve with a rapidly changing world, and it needs to transform to play a role in that future of work you mentioned, where everyone will need to live a more, what I call learning integrated life, right? Filled with ongoing upskilling. I look at technology as supporting the transformation that needs to happen in education, helping education first shift to digital, which then allows for technology to help optimize education, right? Whether it's improved workflow support or, more personalization at scale, things like adaptive learning or gamification, supporting instructors with data and analytics, and, the list goes on. But after we've digitized and optimized, then we're ready for real transformation, which look like new models of education and training, better support for non-traditional learners in our higher education system, like working learners, competency-based learning and mastery models versus older seat time models, new credentialing models. You hear a lot right now about things like stackable micro-credentials, right? And skill certifications. So someone can get employer-valued credentials out of learning along the way without needing to go back and get a full degree or diploma. All of these things we know are coming, but they're really hard to do at scale without technology. And so I think this is where collaboration will have the biggest impact, working together to help mature and scale that state of the art in learning.
I'm going to ask you to gaze into your virtual tech crystal ball now. So bearing in mind everything that you're seeing, the trends that you're seeing and the experience that you've got, what does the future of EdTech look like, or where do you see it heading?
Yeah, it's a good question. We see some industry analysts saying that the global spending on learning will be about $10 trillion by 2030, right? And right now, that's only about 5% digitized. So there's a massive amount of change that needs to happen where EdTech's concerned, and I think it starts with simple adoption, right? We're seeing lots of adoption now, but there are hundreds of disconnected point solutions and apps and content and different approaches, and so I think we should expect to see some consolidation there. But I also hope that we see increased adoption of learning platforms, right? As a way not to just provide richer learning experiences, but also to bring together the myriad of point solutions out there and start to underpin what is a bit of a Wild West approach to technology with some foundational platform technology that can bring together learning data from all of these different silos. It can more easily manage things like privacy and security. And you can also gain a bit more of a holistic view of a person's learning record. So, all of these things will serve to increase the personalization and efficacy of learning for individuals, but it's also going to support better agility and resilience of our learning systems, which we saw a clear need for over the last 12 months.
So can you offer an overview of the kind of problems that you solve for your customers at D2L and what makes you different from other organizations out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll just touch on each of K-12, higher education, and corporate learning at a high level, talk about each a little bit. In K-12, there's really three major categories, and those are blended learning, hybrid learning, and virtual learning, right? Virtual being fully online. In blended learning is face-to-face learning, but it's supported by things like online content and digital tools, right? So you might, for example, teach with digital content in class, and then it's available after school for students and parents to revisit. You might use things like digital grade books and student portfolios of their work. It can facilitate parent communications, things like that. So really it's just supporting the traditional model with better tools. When we think about hybrid learning, this is the idea of having some face-to-face and some online. And hybrid models can help with everything from doing digital snow days, like we're having today with my kids, right? Buses are canceled, schools are closed. So they just shift to online learning for the day. And tomorrow they should return to school per normal. And so, this is actually something that 12 months ago would never have happened. Right. So clearly a lingering impact of the pandemic and the digital infrastructure they put in place. Previously, they just have canceled school for the day. So now kids might hate it, but just like eating their vegetables, it's good for them. And then, the third piece here, virtual learning or online learning. We see this used for a variety of reasons, like better serving rural and remote communities where course selections might be weak, right? Maybe there's no calculus teacher in your small town. So you can take that course online from a teacher based in another city, or maybe there's a pandemic, for example. This option comes in pretty handy for lots of reasons. When we think about higher education, similar models to K-12, right? Largely blended and fully online. There's some fully online universities and colleges, which use our platform to deliver all of their courses and programs. And then there's many traditional universities and colleges which use us for things like continuing education, which is usually online these days. And then for blended learning, for all of their on-campus programs. So students get online content, maybe recorded lectures. They submit assignments online, get their grades, have discussions with their instructors and classmates. And then there's also more advanced technology like our predictive analytics tools, right? Which can flag student risk factors for instructors and provide a dashboard of student risks early, so someone can intervene and get them on track before they fail or drop out, for example. So some really powerful tools that ultimately help to increase student success. And then lastly, our corporate customers, right? They use us for all kinds of different things, all which involve some form of learning. So whether that's an onboarding program for new employees, or leadership training for their managers, an upskilling program for their customer support reps, or maybe they're using Brightspace not to train their own staff, but to train their customers on a new product launch. Some of our customers are actually in the training business and use our Brightspace platform to offer paid courses to their customers. So there's a broad set of use cases, but basically, if there's high quality learning experiences to be delivered, assessed, and tracked, that's what we do with our customers.
And speaking of your customers there, again, I'm curious, what are their biggest challenges from all the conversations that you're having with them, and they're coming to you and asking for your help with? Are there any trends there in the kind of challenges that they're coming to you with?
Yeah, I mean, right now, we're seeing a lot of customers coming our way to look to move beyond what they did to support the emergency remote teaching I talked to, and towards more of a high quality online learning. And, obviously that's something we're great at. And then second, we have customers coming to us saying, we don't want a vendor just to sell us some SaaS software and walk away. We want a true partner, help them navigate the next 20 years into the future of education and upskilling. And they recognize that D2L is investing heavily to help them chart that future. We're doing research, we're investing in R&D, we're convening global customers to share best practices, we're publishing white papers, and we're pushing against policy barriers that move us forward. And we're also delivering on what we say we will. So, I really like the analogy of an icebreaker ship here, right? We invest a lot into innovation so we can explore the future and stay ahead of our customers' needs. And this helps us de-risk that passage for our customers when they're ready to move forward. And in reality, many of our customers are on that icebreaker with us, and that partnership is so important.
And do you have any use cases or examples that we could use that you could share, just to bring everything we're talking about to life here, of how you're helping your customers turn those challenges into opportunities? Is there anything that springs to mind?
Yeah, I mean, we do things like we do joint research and development. We've got a group we call D2L Labs, and a program we run called the D2L Innovation Guild, where we're doing applied research with our customers at the intersection of kind of pedagogy and the scholarship of teaching and learning, and the intersection of that with technology, exploring that future and where the two meet. We have annual, what we call our Fusion Conference every summer, and an exec summit that really brings all of our customers together and explores the future of work and learning through ongoing dialogue. We have the summit every year, but then the discussion continues throughout the year. And more recently, we're also starting to build what we're calling our business academic network, which is to start to strengthen relationships and partnership opportunities between our corporate customers and our academic customers. It's at the early stage, but it has a huge amount of potential to start to break down the silos that we see between industry and academia. And that offers opportunities on both sides, right? The growing need for upskilling in the corporate world, and the education infrastructure the world has built for hundreds of years and needs to better connect, right? And so we think that they both have so much value to offer each other. And that goes back to my earlier point on the need for collaboration, so important.
And what's next for you guys? What's your big focus for the remainder of the year? It's hard to believe that we're already 3 months into 2021, but is there anything that you're particularly excited about this year?
Yeah, 2021, or maybe as I like to call it, 2020 part 2. I think what I can say is that the future of learning looks very different than it used to. At D2L, we're investing heavily in our products, and we actually release new features and functionality every month to our global customer base. So very agile and a continual kind of innovation cycle. And there's lots I'm not ready to talk publicly about yet, but we're super excited about what's ahead. It's going to be an exciting year, I think, for us and our customers. And, I'd encourage everyone to stay tuned and watch for our updates.
I do love a good teaser to end a podcast on. But for anyone that would like to keep up to speed with everything that you're doing there, contact a member of your team or just find out more information, what's the best way of finding D2L online?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can always find us on the web at d2l.com. You can find the company's handle on Twitter at D2L. If your listeners are interested in reading more about our future of work and learning research, you can find our white papers at d2l.com/future of work. And you can find me on Twitter with at Jeremy Auger. That's Auger is Auger.
Excellent. Well, I'll add those links to the blog post just so people can find D2L online nice and easily. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today, talk about how technology is shaping education driven by COVID, and also closing the tech gap and opportunities for EdTech collaboration to push advancement forward and, of course, the future of learning. Exciting stuff. But thanks for joining me today, Jeremy.
My pleasure, Neil. Appreciate you having me on, and it's an exciting time for all of us in this industry, and I look forward to the future.
So, a big thank you to Jeremy for exploring the world of EdTech in a language that everyone can understand. And if EdTech is your area of expertise, or if you're a student who wants to share their insights, get their voice heard and talk about what they're seeing in EdTech, and whatever it is, there's an open door for every single person listening to this podcast, no matter where you are in the world. I invite you all to share your experiences, your opinions, and anything at all, really. That's how this show works. You've heard from me and Jeremy today, but now this is your chance to make your voice heard. So any comments, questions, requests to come on the show, or anything at all, please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. Social channels such as Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn is just at Neil C. Hughes. And if you don't like typing and you'd sooner just send me a quick an audio message that we can play on the podcast, email me that over too. We can do anything, can't we? So please keep those messages coming in. I'll be back waiting for you in your inbox feed when you next open your podcast. When you next open your podcast app of choice tomorrow. I hope you'll join me again then. But thanks for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.